Hello, I'm Jonasz Rewiński. Welcome on board the Eastern Express. And as always, I hope you enjoy the journey. Israel began a third day of strikes in southern Lebanon on Wednesday. After the deadly war in Gaza, which reportedly claimed over 43,000 casualties, another conflict looms on the horizon. This time it is another of Israel's archenemies, the Shia terrorist group Hezbollah, that vows to retaliate for the fate of Palestinians, with Iran once again backing them up with money and arms. The big question for today is what actually sparked the escalation between Israel and neighboring Lebanon, or specifically the organization operating within Lebanon, Hezbollah. So far, it has been mostly a cross-border exchange of fire, but can this lead to history repeating itself, with Israeli troops entering southern Lebanon? Are we on the brink of further bloodshed, a possible regional war between Israel and its avowed foes? We'll try to answer this today on our program.
Israel has launched a major offensive against Hezbollah, carrying out over 1,000 airstrikes on Lebanon in just 2 days. This aggressive move aims to dismantle Hezbollah's military capabilities and deter future attacks. Israeli leaders, including Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, have expressed confidence in the operation's success, highlighting the destruction of thousands of rockets that posed a threat to Israeli citizens.
I think there is a decision here, in the south and in the north, and we must continue until we achieve our goal, to ensure the safe return of Israel's northern residents to their homes.
The offensive has resulted in substantial casualties, with Lebanon reporting over 500 deaths. This toll is nearly half of Lebanon's casualties from the 2006 war between Israel and Hezbollah. The conflict has forced tens of thousands of people to evacuate from Lebanon's south.
Israeli strikes started getting closer, and Israeli planes were in the sky. For sure we were scared. Bit by bit, it reached the fields outside the village and inside it. Of course we could not stay. Everyone is scared.
Israel's strategy is to inflict enough damage on Hezbollah to coerce its leader, Hassan Nasrallah, and his allies in Iran to stop firing rockets into Israel and to push their forces back from the border. The current situation in Lebanon draws parallels to the ongoing conflict in Gaza. Israel has issued warnings to civilians to evacuate areas targeted for attacks, similar to its approach in Gaza. However, critics argue that these warnings are often too vague and insufficient, leading to civilian casualties. Hezbollah is classified as a terrorist organization by Israel and key Western allies, including the US and UK. Israel maintains that its military operations adhere to moral and legal standards, despite the high civilian toll.
And now, as always, it's time to take a look at the issue in greater detail. Great suffering descends once again on the Middle East. In the recent Israeli attack on Hezbollah in Lebanon, hundreds of fighters and civilians were affected. The Israeli army reported that it had conducted a targeted airstrike on the Lebanese capital Beirut. The media began spreading the news that the target of the attack was one of Hezbollah's commanders. Since Monday, Israel has been carrying out its largest airstrikes in years against the Lebanese Shiite terrorist group Hezbollah, which is led by the outspoken cleric Hassan Nasrallah. Over 2 days, they have killed at least 558 people and wounded nearly 2,000. Israel's massive airstrikes against Lebanon's Hezbollah are intended to force the group to cease attacks on Israel. The military has the option to further intensify the pressure. It is believed that a ground invasion is a final but distant step that will be taken if the Iranian-backed group does not relent. Israel's controversial Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has urged the people of Lebanon to get out of harm's way, insisting Hezbollah is using them as human shields, with rockets in their living rooms and missiles in their garages. Now, this is yet another front that Israel is opening. Prime Minister Netanyahu is, in a sense, putting the loyalty of his allies to the test. Will he continue to be able to count on the support of the US and President Joe Biden? How will the escalation affect the ratings of Vice President Kamala Harris? And of course, are we on the brink of a broader conflict? Well, we will discuss this and more with our guest today. And now, here to shed more light on the story is Marcin Krzyżanowski, Middle East expert from the Jagiellonian University. Hello and welcome to Eastern Express.
Hello and thank you for the invitation.
So there have been suggestions that the escalating conflict between Hezbollah and Israel could be, and I quote, another Gaza. Do you think this might be the case? And if not, what are the differences?
It's not the case, at least not the same case, maybe similar, but not the same, definitely. The first most important difference between the situation in the north, in Lebanon, in Gaza, is that Hezbollah is opposite to Hamas, operating on the territory of a foreign country. Technically, Hamas in Gaza was operating on the Israeli soil. War against Hezbollah is a kind of war against foreign entity. The second important difference is that Hezbollah is a much bigger organization, more dangerous organization than Hamas, better equipped, better trained, and better managed.
What are the numbers, actually? Because there are different estimates. They usually say we're about 100,000 strong. There are independent estimates suggesting this could be 50,000, so a very different number, perhaps even less. Would you say that is substantially different from Hamas? And what were the numbers for Hamas before the start of the conflict? It's difficult to verify, but just to make a comparison here.
No, it depends on the methodology. If we consider all also so-called technical staff as members of the organization, or we count just the fighters themselves. If we restrict ourselves to fighters only, not to engineers, not to the collaborators, etc., but only fighting power, Hamas could muster approximately 8 up to 15,000 of fighters. In case of Hamas, in case of Hezbollah, numbers are much bigger. We can estimate the number of active trained fighters for approximately 20 up to 28,000. And of course, we had to add to it supporters, technical staff, and various people cooperating with the organization.
So that's a formidable force, right? And this begs the question: if Hamas was, say, 20,000 strong, even, let's be generous, the total body count in Gaza has reached 43,000 people. So that means even if all Hamas operatives were dead, which they are probably not, still more than a half of the casualties are civilians. I mean, again, we are using the estimates provided by the Palestinian side, but I mean, still, these figures are staggering. And this begs the question, what if Israel decided to launch a ground strike on southern Lebanon? Would the casualty figures be comparable to this? What is the population density there? Because if we have 2 civilians killed for every fighter, 3 civilians killed, I mean, it's impossible to calculate precisely. But still, this goes far beyond what the international community considers acceptable.
Definitely, but we need to remember that the situation in Gaza, although sparked public outrage, didn't change the stance of Western powers toward Israel. They're still supporting it and sacrificing many civilians in the sake of Israeli law to self-defense itself.
Which they absolutely have. I mean, again, if they're attacked by Hezbollah, again, they have the right to defend themselves. And there is no denying that these terrorist organizations are not operating to exert some sort of pressure to achieve limited political objectives. There isn't a binding ideology there that basically is predicated upon the idea that Israel has no right to exist as a state. So obviously Israel is reacting to this. But there is just the question of proportionality, right?
That's true. That's the biggest problem, and it's also a very important topic in the internal Israeli political debate. Some political figures are pushing Israel into full-scale war, no matter the costs and no matter foreign civilians. The opposite side is calling to more moderate response and to combine military pressure with diplomatic activities. And Prime Minister Netanyahu is sitting on the top of that and trying to balance the political influences to save his coalition, his government, and most for him important, his post as a prime minister. So the situation is very complicated, and there is a possibility of further escalation.
So political and diplomatic measures, are they even possible? I mean, some would say that would essentially mean Israel would have to talk to Iran, as Iran is sponsoring these organizations.
That's true. Without Iranian support, Hezbollah couldn't pose such a threat to Israel. Although it's not a puppet of Tehran, it's autonomous organization, but heavily dependent on Iranian support. Yesterday, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian, during his visit to the UN meeting in New York, told to journalists that Iran is ready to put down its weapon if Israel will do the same. Of course, that declaration sparked outrage within Iranian political sphere, but the word was said. Although I have to admit that at the moment I can't imagine talks, direct or indirect talks involving Iran and Israel at the same time.
And how should that be interpreted? Putting down arms, would that mean a ceasefire? Would that mean going for a two-state solution, respecting the rights of Palestinians? These are two very different things, right? And it remains to be seen what Iran actually meant by that, even if, this declaration could be, as you're saying, taken at face value. Because you always have the Iranian clerics being essentially at the top of the game, right? I mean, they're not controlling Mr. Pezeshkian directly, but I mean, they have a lot to say there, don't they?
Oh, definitely. The last word is always the word of the supreme leader, and no one knows. As the statement of President Pezeshkian was took as a surprise. No one knows what exactly he meant by saying that. Most probably, as most Iranian politicians and experts saying, most probably the meaning of the statement was that if Israel will reach some kind of agreement with Hamas and Hezbollah, Iran will step down at least a little bit, but it will be only a stage, because Iran, of course, is supporting at least two-state solution, not to mention wiping out Israel off the map.
So, of course, that is a major problem there. Also, the nature of grievances. We know what the grievances are between the Palestinians and Israel. What about Hezbollah? Because this is not just about aiding Hamas. There is a long-standing conflict there.
Definitely. Hezbollah and Hamas are part of so-called axis of resistance, but they are not not the same side of one coin. First of all, Hezbollah is Shia organization based outside Israel and Lebanon. Hamas is Sunni organization based, let's say, within the borders of Israel. The Hamas is indigenous organization. Hezbollah was partially created by the Iranian clerics and volunteers to protect the Lebanese Shia community against Christians and Sunni Muslims. Hamas is not involved in international conflicts, let's say international policy. Hezbollah is an international actor, and Hezbollah is closer to being a state than being simple terrorist organization.
Which brings me to my final question. What is the political standing of Hezbollah in Lebanon? Because this is not exactly a war between Lebanon and Israel. We definitely should not treat it as such. But then again, it's not as if Hezbollah is simply hiding there somewhere and the government trying to root it out. I mean, they do have people inside the current caretaker government. So can you explain briefly how the organization functions within Lebanon politically?
As Hezbollah is not only a terrorist organization or military organization, if somebody wants to call it like that, but also a political party, charity organization, self-defense organization, and kind of educational institute. Lebanon is a state with a population very deeply divided. There are a group of, first of all, Christians, various denominations of it, Sunni Muslims, Shia Muslims, and some Druzes. And each religious group is divided further into tribes or clans and families. And usually the loyalty of the community members lie in the line of the community, not the state of Lebanon. And Hezbollah was created, as I said before, Hezbollah was created with the help of Iran as a tool to self-organize and to defend Shia community in the conflict against other religious groups as Shia Muslim and Christians. We need to remember that Lebanon was a scene of a very brutal civil war in the last few decades. And that's why at the moment Lebanon is a kind of so-called failed state, because the government of Lebanon is unable to govern the country. The government is unable to hold the state monopoly to use force. The government is not controlling the full territory of Lebanon. So the Hezbollah is at the same state within the state and a political party within the Lebanon political system. And Lebanon's political system is very complicated, as it is based on the confession. So the constitution guarantees that the president has to be a Christian, the prime minister a Sunni Muslim, and parliament speaker a Shia Muslim. And at the moment, Lebanese are unable to to choose the new president because of the block from the veto from the side of Hezbollah.
So there you have it, Hezbollah navigating the political crisis in Lebanon, exploiting the desire of aggression of some of its followers towards Israel, with Iran nodding approvingly, in the very least, somewhere in the background. Very complicated situation there. No longer calm before the storm, but will the storm actually escalate? Well, that remains to be seen. Marcin Krzyżanowski was our guest today here on Eastern Express. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your expertise.
Thank you very much and have a nice day.
And now we're moving on to Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you really don't want to miss. In his final address, the United Nations General Assembly, US President Joe Biden called on member states to maintain their support for Ukraine amidst the ongoing conflict with Russia. Biden emphasized the resilience of the Ukrainian people and the unity of NATO allies in response to Russia's invasion back in February 2022.
Putin's war has failed.
With these words, Biden highlighted that Ukraine remains free and NATO has grown stronger with the addition of Finland and Sweden. He urged the international community to continue standing with Ukraine, warning against complacency. Despite Biden's vocal support for Ukraine, some are criticising his administration's indecision to allow Kyiv to strike deep inside Russian territory using Western long-range weapons. An issue expected to be discussed between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and his Western counterparts this week.
Or walk away.
Ukrainian and Polish officials discussed and agreed upon several key issues, according to the Ukrainian news agency Ukrinform. This announcement was made following the session of the Parliamentary Assembly of Ukraine and Poland.
The adopted declaration highlights that Ukraine and Poland have agreed to cooperate on countering Russian aggression, rebuilding Ukraine and mobilizing international aid for the country defending itself against Russian attacks. The document also states that Warsaw supports Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's peace formula as the only credible basis for future peace negotiations. Parliamentarians from both countries also underscored the importance of historical dialogue. They declared a commitment to more intensive cooperation in conducting searches, exhumations and other activities aimed at the dignified burial of victims of conflicts, repressions and crimes committed on the territories of Poland and Ukraine.
Polish President Andrzej Duda delivered a stark warning at the United Nations, stating that Russia's actions pose a significant threat to the international rule-based order. Speaking at the Summit of the Future, Duda emphasized that Russia's aggression against Ukraine is a clear violation of the UN Charter and international law.
We cannot accept that those who challenge the order based on the UN Charter are gaining strength. Russia's aggression against Ukraine is a striking example. As a permanent member of the Security Council, Russia should uphold the UN Charter and the international law.
Duda's remarks come as he prepares to attend the 79th session of the UN General Assembly. His comments highlight the ongoing tensions and the international community's concerns over Russia's actions in Ukraine. Meanwhile, Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski echoed Duda's sentiments, stating that the war in Ukraine will only end when Russian President Vladimir Putin realizes his mistake. Sikorski stressed the importance of continued Western support for Ukraine to ensure its victory in the conflict.
And for this episode of Eastern Express, it's the end of the line. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates. I'm Jonasz Rewiński. Bye for now.